Welcome to Growth Architects, a podcast for tech entrepreneurs, product innovators, and marketing strategists. Whether you're searching for product market fit, exploring new growth channels, or trying to avoid common startup pitfall, this is where you'll find proven strategies to fuel your success. And now, let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Growth Architects. The topic of today is accessibility. Accessibility is a huge opportunity for business leaders because it's a huge untapped market. And today we're discussing it with Vanessa Vigar, the CMO of Envision. Vanessa, it's a huge pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm so glad we connected, and it's great.
Yeah. Well, with you today, we're going to discuss all the ins and outs of accessibility, both from the point of view of what it is, but also considering that in Europe, there has been a huge legislation update that actually made it mandatory to be compliant with accessibility. And also, we're going to discuss the opportunity there. And since we talk about, say, SMEs and growth opportunities, accessibility is a huge untapped market with a lot of people don't even know of. So with your help today, we're really gonna dive into that. But before we do it, I would actually like to know more about your story, because actually you come from a background of sight loss, which has also shaped your career. And so would you like to tell us more about yourself and how you get to be the CMO of Envision?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been working forever. I must be like the oldest person in our company, so I won't bore everybody with too long a history. But I started off in communications and PR and then went in-house from agency into media organizations. I lived in Asia doing that, Germany, UK, and then now the Netherlands. So as those media companies transitioned to, digital and went across with broadband, and we went across into mobile services, streaming services, I kind of went with the flow and actually ended up working with more of the technology companies and appealed to my inner geek. I was like, I love media, I love that production, but I actually was the workings of the technology that blew my mind, and it still does. And so I was working in that space for 25 years and probably a bit longer. And it came to a point that I was beginning to notice there was something with my eyesight. It was behaving weirdly, and I went for checkups and things. And about 25 years ago, oh my gosh, is it that long? Yes, it is. I was diagnosed with something called retinitis pigmentosa, RP. And it is actually quite a common degenerative condition, a retinal condition. It's inherited normally. So it's in your DNA, so it's bad code. And what it does, it manifests itself, different speeds, different ways for different people, mostly with night blindness. And then you lose, your retina, the cones and rods on the back of your eye break down. And so you lose sort of things like being able to see detail and definition and peripheral vision. Now, thankfully for me, it was diagnosed quite late. In my 30s, I had, sort of slow depreciation. I've had it all my life, but only started really being clumsy and walking into things and falling over in the dark. And I always thought that was just me. So what's happened is that, long story short, it got harder to work in an environment where I've always been one of the few women in my space. Being a woman with sight loss was going to make my life even harder, to be honest. And I was really at a crossroads. And then this opportunity with Envision here in the Netherlands came along. And they're a software company. They started in 2016, creating really cool products and services for people who are blind to low vision. And so they needed a CMO. And here's this great tech company on an amazing mission. And it was very fortuitous on both sides. Hopefully I can bring my experience and help the companies. We've gone through this sort of massive change in the last few years. But also it was a very good way for me to actually accept my sight loss, dare I say, embrace it. I always find that a hard thing to say, but, use it. And it's much easier for me to talk about it, even on this podcast, in context from a professional perspective. Sometimes talking about it privately, I find it's difficult, and that's okay. But from a professional point of view, it helps me resonate with our audience and our community and our customers that we're trying to help with our products, but it also helps me keep our team real. And in my team and my colleagues, we have, people who are fully blind, as well as myself. So we try and steer that with, every aspect of the organization. And so that's really where I am now. And it's a continuous story and I keep having to adapt, but that's life.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story. And indeed, obviously, it's something that You probably don't share every day, but indeed we're taking it today from
That's
the
good.
point of view of how that has shaped your career, and also how that made you more aware of a topic that perhaps you were not aware of before. And that
Yes.
tends to be actually the same case for a lot of people around us, right? That kind of ignore how many people around us have, for example, problem of being visually impaired, or any kind of disability that make it mean for them that they cannot access, for example, in this case, the web as they would like to be. And that was the reason why, say, a lot of technology has developed in that case, and also some legislation. And I would like to kind of check today with you where we are.
Mm-hmm.
But where do you think we are as, say, European Union from that point of view? Where do you think companies are?
Well, the fact that there had to be legislation says everything. I think there was a lot of well-meaning with DEI. There was a lot of mouthpiece around it, and there was sort of a lot of good PR that was done, but not really a great lot of action. Even really big companies, and I won't name them, they're struggling at the first step sometimes because they don't necessarily have dedicated people or resources for accessibility. It's normally a function that's bundled up with, an HR or I don't know, a particular, or even in marketing in some organizations. So without a dedicated person who has to also think of every kind of accessibility, it's so overwhelming. So I'd say it's still grassroots. I think there's a few companies that are doing better than others. There are some that, what happens normally is somebody who's an outliner, who's blind or low vision or deaf, low hearing, or in a wheelchair or so on and so forth, has made it into an organization by hook or crook and just being amazingly brilliant, to be honest. And they then from inside the organization will facilitate change. I know so many people who've had this experience, whether they've been working at booking.com, or they've been working at Unilever, or they've been working at Amsterdam University. They made it in there somehow, even the Dutch revenue. So they go in, they work, and then when they're there, from the inside out educate. Even people at Walt Disney Resorts, Western hotels, the Hilton Hotel. I can name people who are in positions there who are completely blind or very low vision, who've had to do the education from the inside outwards. And those companies are lucky. They're really lucky that those people are in their organizations to do that. But they didn't. You just want to be good at your job, right? You just want to be a really good lecturer, or you want to be a really good accountant or financial advisor, or you want to just be good, or a marketer. You don't really want to be also given the advocacy role for your whole group of community of people with disabilities just because you have one. And it tends to get lumped on our shoulders. And sometimes that can be really exhausting and you get burnout. Well, funny that you've got two jobs, right? So I think you can hear this is close to my heart. It has all the opportunities to do this and hasn't done it. And so now you've got this regulation coming in. So the good thing is there are lots of organizations there and individuals to help. You just have to kind of search for them. I know several people in the Netherlands doing consulting work in this very area, going in and sitting with companies and saying, oh, I'll check your website, I'll check your apps. But how sad is that you have to retrofit? So our mantra, and it's sort of absolutely natural. The whole premise of our business is to build for accessibility first. But if every company or business just involved a group of people with accessibility needs, just make an accessibility board. I was thinking this morning coming in, I'm in a room at the moment with 4 chairs around a table. You could put somebody who's blind and low vision in one, somebody who's deaf or low hearing in the other, and somebody else in a wheelchair, somebody with, cognitive needs, right? So, you put those people around a table and you say to them, okay, this is our business, what can we do? They will give you honest, real feedback, and they will, help you shape from the inside out. And of course, it takes change, but you could do that in incremental steps. So we've got a long way to go is the answer. I am somewhat encouraged by this act. I don't know the data points on how many companies are in line with it now. It's very easy to check. You just look at a website and run it through a screen reader or check an app and switch on VoiceOver on your iPhone and see if it works. But, there's a lot of help out there and there's a lot of information online as well. So hopefully that this act will galvanize people to get there.
Yeah. Well, actually, with Sparker, we made a bit of research into compliance of larger companies into the new directive. And well, it was this summer. Actually, less of 50% of them are compliant with
I'm not
the new
surprised.
directive.
What's the deadline if you don't stick to it, really? But
Oh, well,
what's
the deadline was already 2025.
Yeah,
Well,
June.
that means that we're late.
It's gone, right? But the fines are
Exactly.
really big. There's some significant fines for this, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, nice to have, otherwise no one will do it, but there are actual fines. You can lose money by not doing this. And I
No,
don't think the
exactly.
asks are huge. I really
Exactly.
don't.
But I think also the public debate around it is kind of like not really existent. So I think
Mm,
that's one side. But what I would like to explore with you today is really like the opportunity side that can come
yeah,
from accessibility. Because actually, yeah, I mean, we all know that we are in a market that gets more and more saturated, right? Where advertising costs always more, and having people convert on your website also costs always more. But well, actually, you shared with me some data where it seems that 78% of the European population has some form of disability, which means that it's a market that probably 60% of your competitors don't serve. And I suspect that the number is actually even higher in
yeah,
small,
me
medium
too.
companies. So that means that it's a huge market for all the small, medium companies that want to kind of better serve that market. And I think you can do it in two ways, right? You can simply be compliant, but you can also think of like developing technology that better serves that market. So I'm curious to see how you guys do it at Envision, and what's your, say, success story that you can share.
It's a really, really good point. And oh, by the way, another data point, since we're throwing some around, 38% apparently of companies perform better if they have somebody with an accessibility need in their decision-making process, right? So there's a need to put people with accessibility needs in board positions, and advisory board positions, at least. So yeah, that's just one message. But yeah, how do we do it in Envision? Well, we live and breathe it. So we are the extreme case, right? And just really, really short, we're a small, medium-sized company based in the Netherlands. We operate internationally. And our first app, the Envision AI app, came out of a thesis project from TU Delft from our CEO. And it won an award with Google Play. We went over to Google. We took on all the Google Glass, which had tried to do a direct-to-consumer proposition, which failed miserably, but worked perfectly for our audience. Really good wide-angle lens camera on it. It has great processing power. We built and ported our app onto that, and then developed these two products. And then with the information of the growth of AI, that became more and more prevalent on the glasses. And now we've launched Ally, which is this highly accessible AI assistant. And we're launching a new pair of glasses any minute as well, called the Ally Solos glasses. So our portfolio is quite wide. And so that wide portfolio really also gives people the chance to, for free, use the product. So anyone can use it who's blind, low vision, or just actually somebody who wants easy access to information. So that was the first step. So making it truly accessible, not just by what it does, but actually by finding the thing. We even have a web version. And then the second thing was to work with hardware providers to have a hands-free version, a wearable version. As we know, wearables are booming, it's taking off like mad. But of course, when you're working, to have your hands free is, fantastic, right? For anyone. But when you're blind or you're low vision, you don't be holding your phone up. But you also, a lot of the time, you're going to have a cane or a dog when you're moving around. And so this wearable option becomes really important. So what we've done is that we've built different levels of products depending on what the funding options are for some countries. So, some of the countries do it quite well, some do it terribly, some are sort of in the middle. So in the Netherlands, for instance, if you are blind or low vision and you have a job or you've been invited to do a job, you can apply for accommodations, these technologies, to do your job. And that is something that the government can support, the UWV can potentially support. By the way, applications can take up to 6 months. And by that time, I'm not sure how many jobs stay open. So if you're listening, UVV, speed it up. And the other, you can also then, if you're, going through that for yourself or through a company, can also do it through insurance. But again, they're very particular. There's very rigid categories. It's very hard. Insurance makes it hard, of course. That's their business model. But again, you have to be determined. And people who are blind, low vision, and I'm sure it's the deaf, low hearing community, and those people with mobility needs as well, or any needs, you're pretty resilient. You have to be resilient, and you have to be a problem-solving person who's just going to work around this problem that we got. So I think what we've tried to do is have a wide range of product that can either individuals can get themselves through their own accommodations with their own funds and needs and all for free. And then also working with organizations and companies to help provide those to people also in academia. So in the UK, for instance, they have students accessibility allowance or disabled students accessibility allowance. And our products are part of those packages that students can apply for. And it's a similar thing here. Students and employees can apply through the government for accommodations. It's painful, it's horrible, we always know that, but at least they're listed in there.
But
and in
exists.
Germany, for instance, we had to get recognized as a medical device for the Envision glasses, for instance. But I think the wide range of products, I think that's what we've done. And we just try to educate, wherever we can. We even run an event, one coming up on November the 11th, is this year's event called Inclusive Innovations. And we try to give a platform for companies that we didn't have at the beginning to showcase their innovations and their products for accessibility, whether it's from, being able to read documents, being able to, there's actually a company who's applied for this year to identify when there's roadworks in front of you, which we all find a nightmare, but believe me, when you can't see, it's a hazard as well. Other ones for actually navigating public transport specifically. And so there's lots of bespoke, really cool pockets of innovation. And what, I'd see happening is that these will collaborate, come together. And I hope that the Vision's goal here is to be that accessibility platform on any device, right? But it's really exciting. And I love that event because then it also is a huge education for government organizations, people who are thinking about accessibility in the workplace and don't know where to start. It's a nice low, laagdrempelig, easy entry level to come in as.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you mentioned the kind of solution that you're providing, but I would guess that probably a lot of people are not even familiar, right, with the kind of challenge that it could be for someone with, for example, visual impairment to say consume a website. So can you share with us some of the of the common challenges that someone who's visually impaired faces when, for example, they're accessing the internet?
Yeah, exactly. So imagine first of all, want to find out about jobs, right? So you go onto job sites and you go and you Google and you look for those things. There's little things like if you go onto a website and it's not compatible for a screen reader, it's incredibly noisy to listen to. If you've ever overheard anyone who's blind listening to their phone, and yes, we use the phones all the time, it's a lot of noise because everything is spoken back. It's the same with a website. And there are screen readers built for reading websites. And the Envision glasses read them as well, but it's a lot of information. And so if the website isn't structured right, it can be a really disorientating experience and very, very hard. Labels, buttons, and, things aren't labeled, images aren't labeled. You just hear a lot of white noise, a lot of rubbish. But what actually happens as well, one thing good to know, screen readers always list all the URLs at the top of the page. So if you've got a page full of URLs, you've got to plow your way through 10 or 15 of these things. I have been held to ransom by my held to account, and to ransom sometimes by our community on this. They're like, unless you've got too many URLs on this page, it's really noisy for me. So I'm like, okay, you're right. So keep those low, label everything, right? All good, I say, simple web building tools now, you should be able to do that. And putting alt text behind an image, that's really, really easy to do. You have to dig around maybe, and get a bit, do a bit of research, but hey, that's good, right? So put that in, think about simplicity, think about high contrast. So it's not just, for people who are fully blind, but people who are low vision like myself. High contrast really helps. So if you look at a good guide is to go onto your local blind charity or the RNIB in the UK or Bartimaeus or Visio here in the Netherlands or any of your local, you can just find them, right? And look at how they do it. And they could do better, to be honest. And sometimes it looks horrible to someone who's sighted, funny enough. So they could do a bit better there for sighted folks who are trying to get information. But for people who are blind or using screen readers or have need for contrast, you'll see a very clear way they do it. So they put icons up in the top right-hand corner, for instance, that show you can easily increase the text size. You can do reverse, so you can do it with contrast, with yellow and black black type on a yellow background, for instance, all those options. So just go and look at what those organizers are doing. And the accessibility, there's, the rulings on this. I've got a whole list of resources that we can share maybe, but, there's a lot of information out there. And did you know that 1 in 3 men are colorblind? So, I mean, not just men, women as well. So don't use red and green, just don't do it. Think of other colors. So you won't see any red and green, or you shouldn't, on the Envision websites or the Ally websites that we're running. So there's some real simple things you can do there, and get somebody who's blind to check it, right? Find somebody through a blind or low vision organization, again, all online. If you don't know anybody, contact me. I'll give you names, but they'll listen to your site. They'll check your app and they'll tell you what doesn't work. And it's a business. You're giving a job to somebody as well.
Thanks. Well, I think it's a very interesting point of view, because what I'm hearing is two different things. The first one is like, say, the experience of someone who is, for example, visually impaired. How would that person, say, read and visit your website? So what you said there is that there's a bunch of things that sometimes are not taken into account, or at least they're not the first thought. Actually interesting, the same accessibility principles that you mentioned are also important to rank your page on Google. So the same things that you looked at, when you mentioned alt text, for example, or right contrast and user experience, those are the same things that also Google takes into account when they decide to rank your page higher or lower. So again, in following these principles, there is also a huge opportunity in terms of growth of your website. And the second one, and the second one is also the part of like user experience, basically. So not just, say, adapting guidelines, blindly, so to say, but actually making sure that they're also double checked by someone. So I think it's very necessary, this part of like having some kind of audit of your website.
Exactly. Get that little group of people into your organization, and they'd love it.
Absolutely. We have been doing some interesting experiments there. And I think what's interesting, whenever you do some kind of user testing, is that you realize that it doesn't matter how much you think about things. Whenever you have your website, for example, reviewed by your real target audience, there's always something that you have never thought of before that comes
exactly.
up.
It's
Problems you would
basic
have never thought
marketing,
of.
right? It's basic marketing. But unless you know and think of those people as your market, you're not going to include them. And I think that's just the top level thing. As marketers, think broader than people like you, right? And there are people who are blind and low vision at the top of some marketing food chains, very few. But I always think that's amazing. And I can make a confession here, right? Until I got diagnosed with an eye condition myself, I didn't think about those things. I've been in marketing for years. Shame on me, right? But the world is changing. There's regulation now. There's a greater awareness, which is fantastic, but we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. Also, if you have a website, you're a large company or an e-commerce or a travel company, and you haven't adapted to the new guidelines, chances are that you have a high risk of having a fine, at least in European Union. So there is, from this year at least, there's a new reason why you should really look at it. Vanessa, I'm also curious to hear from you. So we mentioned about, say, the opportunity there. Your company is obviously very invested into it. As a marketer, what kind of return have you seen on being, say, more aware of this whole problem?
Oh my gosh, individually, you mean, as a person or as a...
Yeah, I'm curious, like, obviously everything that you do now needs to have that kind of angle. Have you seen something different in terms of like result of your marketing activities?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Somebody comes to join the team, right? And you're saying, okay, we've got this great mission. They love our mission, giving access to information for people who are blind and low vision. Wonderful mission, great products, cool company, free yoga, all that stuff. And then I say, yeah, but we're marketing to people who can't see, right? And you see the marketer's face go, but I've got these video ideas. I've got this and I've got this image and I'm working on this packaging. I'm like, they can't see that, right? So half can, some can, but you have to create everything assuming people can't see. It does your head in as a marketer, especially if, I came from media, right? It was all about visual storytelling. And we talk all the time about visual storytelling. And so people said, oh, okay, so that writes out TikTok and that writes out social media. I'm like, hell no. Have you actually been on blind TikTok? Have you actually been on Instagram and seen the blimfluencers out there? You know, people who can't see are using social media. There's wonderful audio that can be done. There's some incredible stuff you can do with Reels. And it's kind of got to get your head around it. So from that, I kind of get a kick out of that shock now because I'm still learning. You know, we're still seeing new channels come along that, you know, Discourse, for instance, is a fantastic, it's like an old school platform, but it's fantastic and accessible for the blind and low vision community. You know, Facebook continues to be a very popular platform because of its accessibility, even though, you know, other channels could probably do a bit better. There's channels that have been somewhat boycotted because of people's, and the owner's view on accessibility remain nameless. But I think those have been the biggest things.
Because now you made me curious.
X, yeah.
X, okay. They're not.
He Musk fired all the accessibility team, right, on Twitter before he changed it. So there was this huge outcry. Having said that, blind Twitter or X is still pretty active. So people use different channels. There's a really cool, if you want to tap into the blind and low vision community and you're absolutely serious about it, there's platforms like Groups.io. It's just email-based community. And I'm on there with our platform, but also Smart Glasses that has its own channels there, you know, hard coded into a lot of the blind low vision community. And those are people you generally talk about who are, you know, generally interested in the technologies and the tools and the services. But there's lots of really cool blind and low vision groups on Facebook. You know, if you were to go to them and say, hey, we're looking at this product, we want to get your feedback. I mean, I guarantee, give them a sign up form for being testers. They'll be there. Especially if you offer them an Amazon voucher, you know, why not? You know, everybody should get some rewards. But I do think that's been some of the things. I think personally for myself I thought it was such a big thing, but actually it's quite a small thing, little things you can do, and you just build it into your workflow. So we created on ChatGPT, alt text creator. You know, you created a custom GPT that just creates your alt text for you. So you drop a picture in and it spits it out. And we just build that in. And what is frustrating as well is that, you know, we want to use we want to use marketing platforms like HubSpot and all of these, Publer, and we're experimenting with all of them. None of them can do all the accessibility stuff. So a lot of the time, if you're publishing to multiple social platforms, there's always a bit of manual work that still needs to be done in many cases, just to double check it, which is frustrating. And I'm hoping that we can do that. And of course, like any marketer or any marketing team right now, you're not just thinking about SEO, you're trying to get your head around all the generative engines and search that you can do, right? And if you have apps, of course, you've got, you know, app search optimization as well. So there's nothing that combines all of that. I had a colleague who wanted to build that, but that wasn't core to what we were spending our days doing. And that whole GEO area is fascinating for us. And we talked about alt text helping your search findings and helping your SEO with Google, but it's exactly the same with GEO as well. You know, platforms like Wikipedia and dare I say it, these sort of other platforms, you think, do I really need to be on those? Yes, you do if you want to be found. And again, you've got a great opportunity there to write really descriptive text-based and audio-based files that can be really accessible for people who are blind and low vision. And yeah, use audio. We're on an audio base here. I know some people can see this and some people will be listening to this. So think about the listening. You know, there was one new thing that was added onto, was it into Drive or Word? I was listening. You can actually listen back to what you're writing. So before I had to highlight it and then put the dictation thing and it read it back to me. Now it's actually a button up there. So when you're writing, you can press that button and it's got a little play button top right hand corner and it will read it back to you. So listen to your content.
Nice. Very interesting. Well, Vanessa, it has been a very interesting chat with you today. So I want to thank you again for your time. Well, you also shared with me a bunch of resources that will be in the show notes that companies can access in terms of like, how can I be more accessible? What kind of resources are out there? So if you're interested into that, check the show links. One last question I have for you, like if listeners would have to take one thing out of the chat that we had today, what do you think it would be?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I thought of it before, but now since we've been talking, I'm thinking again. I honestly think it's responsibility. As if you're a marketer or a business owner, it's your responsibility as to your stakeholders, your shareholders, to the success of your business, to make it accessible to as many people as possible. Why would you exclude people that would want to buy your products or services or get access to them? So I think it's good business sense. As business leaders, it's your responsibility as business sense. And as a good, corporate citizen, I think it's your social responsibility as well.
Great words. Well, thanks a lot, Vanessa. Well, I want to thank you again for your time. What's the best way for people to get in touch and know more about what you guys do at Inpatient?
Yeah, sure. They can always go to our website, and that's letsenvision.com. That's letsenvision.com. So that's the website. And they can also just look for Ally, ALLY.me, and that's our new baby. And we're on most of the social platforms. If we're not, we should be. But that's probably the best way to contact us.
Amazing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.